here's the deal. It is understood within the industry, the overwhelming assumption is that Juan Soto will end up with either the Yankees or the Mets. If he does not end up with a team in New York, people would be very surprised. Now, look, could that end up happening? Sure. The Arizona Diamondbacks made the 2023 World Series. I got married. Upsets happen. But the expectation is he ends up in either navy pinstripes or royal blue pinstripes over in Queens. And I think it is worth unpacking slightly why Juan Soto is so sought after. We have had big free agents hit the market over the last couple of years. Shohei Ohtani last year got a fake $700 million. More on that in a second. 2 years ago, Aaron Judge. Soto is expected to break both of those records. Now, I think you and I would agree that Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge are better baseball players than Juan Soto right now. If I wanted one of them for a playoff run, maybe I'd pick Soto. But for the regular season,
I don't know. They're all in conversation for who's the first player you want to take. But sure,
Ohtani also pitches, so I would easily take him. Yep. Aaron Judge put up the best offensive season we've seen since Barry Bonds. I would also take him. But the reason that Juan Soto is going to get paid more than both of them is very simple, and it is his age. Because Juan Soto debuted as a 19-year-old in 2018, it means that he is hitting the open market having just turned 26. He will be age 26 for all of next season. When you are breaking the bank for a player, knowing that you will get not just his decline, that's still good, but his prime makes him even more valuable. And it is so extraordinarily rare for a player to reach the market at this age.
And that is what is so amazing when you think about the projections that we're getting for Juan Soto is there's really only one comparison in recent memory, and that is Bryce Harper, who was also a Scott Boras client. And Bryce Harper...
I disagree.
Oh, all right. Do you have another example? Or?
Manny Machado did not have the same track record of offensive production necessarily, but Machado did hit the open market that same year as Harper at the same age.
Yes, that is correct. However, I was going to mention him because the fact that both of those guys took as long as they did, because remember, at the start of that offseason, we assumed that both of them would be driving up to prices we'd never seen before. And while they both did get big contracts, it did not necessarily ended up being the bidding war that we expected. And the fact that Bryce Harper, I use him as the comparison because of the profile of hitter that we're talking about and what he had accomplished as a hitter. But it's true, Machado had accomplished plenty in his time in Baltimore at a very young age as well. So if you want to throw him in that mix too, those guys signed for, a little over $300 million. And now we're talking about someone getting possibly more than $200 million more than that. Now, yes, you can say inflation, but that's not that long ago. And so why is it that Soto is going to be in position to get that much more, would you say?
I think his skill set is more reliable than where those two were at. I think he is a more bankable offensive force. He is a better offensive player or has produced more offensively than those two guys had to this point. Like, you could look at Harper in Philly and be like, oh, well, he has lived up and beyond the contract, but go look at those numbers before he turned 26 and hit the market. Like, Soto's just straight up better. Like, that's
definitely more consistent, right? And I think it's the floor that we're talking about. It's basically the highest floor you can possibly have for a hitter, right? And that's when you bring it back to Judge and Ohtani. This is why Soto is, when we talk about bankable and safe, and why owners are going to feel so comfortable giving him as much money as they're going to do. Harper did reach those peaks, man. That 2015 was as good of a season as anything
Absolutely.
Soto has done, right? But, it was a little bit more up and down. There were times when he wasn't one of the best hitters in the sport in the way that Soto has been the whole time.
Soto's 2023, to me, is the most important season on his resume because he looked discombobulated and unhappy and out of sync in San Diego for an underperforming team. And yet, when you look at the numbers, he had a 930 OPS, led the lead in walks, and was a 5.5 win player. And so when you're like, what does a Juan Soto down year look like? And it looks like that. That's what you pay for. That is what you pay for. He's never been hurt. Seriously, knock on wood. He plays every day. Like, this is what you break the bank for. And that is why the money is going to stretch easily over $500 million. And now I want to bring in Ohtani, because the Ohtani contract, the headline is $700 million over 10 years. But because of the wonky deferrals and the way that the money's paid out, that's not the present value of the contract. And the MLB values it like the cap hit or the luxury tax hit is $46 million a year. And that is kind of the number that within the industry is thought of as like, that's the record, right? The highest AAV, average annual value, is $46 million. Soto and his agent Scott Boras are going to try and surpass that. So in my mind, you can put the floor for his AAV at like 46.5, 47. Then you just multiply that number by 12 or 13, and like that's the floor of the contract. So let me do some quick maths. 12 times 46.5 is $558 million.
But I also think that, again, a lot of the ways that these contracts work is they are based on precedent. They are based on beating the previous number, especially when you're an agent like Boras. So that 46 number is also, that's absolutely makes sense in terms of something to strive for. But also because of his age, maybe you're searching for the longest contract ever, which is also in play, right? We've seen 13-year deals. Obviously, with Harvard, we saw as an extension too with Tatis, I believe. Maybe it's a 14 or 15-year deal, right? And maybe the AAV is slightly lower, but that's how you get it to an even higher number. That's also going to be in play. But I agree that those are the numbers that we're kind of looking at in terms of as what they'll be shooting for. And then, I mean, there's going to be maybe the floor is something around there, and then it's just going to be, all right, that's where we're at. Yankees and Mets, Dodgers, whoever. How high do you want to go? And then you go from there. Now, it's possible it gets to a point where once you reach that, it's just like then you eventually just go to Juan Soto and say, all right, where do you actually want to play? Because you're going to be getting the biggest contract ever no matter what. And maybe eventually that just becomes his decision and it isn't strictly highest bidder. But maybe it is a situation where one of the teams is so much farther ahead that's kind of where it ends up.
You make a great point right there. Because I do believe that Juan Soto will end up playing for the team that offers him the most money. But there is a scenario in play in which the two teams are offering him a similar amount of money, and he has to make a decision based upon the soft factors. And we don't know what he wants. He has said all of the right things this year about being a Yankee and clapping at the fans and waving to the "We Want Soto" chants. But maybe he really admires Francisco Lindor and wants to play with him. Like maybe he has heard great things about Carlos Mendoza. Maybe he's excited to see what the, housing development construction next to Citi Field is going to look like in 12 years. Or we don't know. We know that he wants to win. And I think that the Yankees and the Mets, over the length of the contract, give him a similar window to do that. Yeah. I think that a lot of times for a free agent, if we were comparing Yankees and Mets, you'd be like, well, the Yankees give him a better chance to win. Right now, given the outlooks of these two franchises and the money that the Mets have at their disposal, what David Stearns, their president of baseball operations, has already accomplished and the pieces they have in place, I think it's a similar level right there.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about that before we broaden this out to just like mention the other teams who we think are maybe potentially going to be involved is Juan Soto we know he wants to win, and I believe him when he says that. I do believe him that that's a priority. And I think it's a good point about the Yankees and Mets thinking about it long term. But are players really thinking about, okay, where am I going to be winning in 2030? I mean, maybe to some degree, yes. You want to trust that. And that's part of meeting with the owners, meeting with the front offices and like trusting the vision. I do believe that that's important. But ultimately, it's also like, He wants to keep winning right now. And so the Mets have a lot of work to do. Even if they sign Juan Soto, there's a roster that doesn't mean I don't expect them to be good next year. But, that's another thing that is going to be part of the vision that they're going to have to sell is be like, yes, we're here. Here's your $600 million. And then we're also going to do X, Y, and Z, which, again, there's no reason to expect that they won't. Whereas the Yankees feel at least a little bit, but I don't know, they're both in similar spots, which, okay, then let's broaden this back out. Let's say the Dodgers are involved. You want to win? That's the place to go. As Ohtani just showed us, we know that is the safest place in the league to go appear in the postseason. There is no other team that any of us would be picking, and I would be saying this even if they had lost in the first round this past postseason. That is the team. If you want to win, you want to go back to October, that's the team to pick. So maybe they will be involved. There's no reason to expect them not to try because they've tried on every good player ever in the last 10 years, and some of them they've gotten and some of them they haven't. But it seems like people are not expecting them to be a real threat.
I do think that they're in a category just below, not just below Mets and Yankees, but I think they are a little bit ahead of those other teams just because of the financial might they can wield, and it won't restrict them from doing other business. They have a hole in a corner outfield spot if they let Teoscar walk. And so...
And apparently the other corner outfield spot too, if Mookie Betts is not playing right field anymore, which we can get to later.
And so I do think the Dodgers, at least in my mind, are above this other gaggle of teams, which we can get into now very quickly. The Phillies, I think, are interesting. Their owner spends a lot of money. They were bounced embarrassingly in the first round, having won only one playoff game. You could see a scenario where he's like, F it, I'm opening the piggy bank. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I do think we will have a report at some point in the next month that's like Phillies sniffing around on Juan Soto.
Yeah, I mean, we had some version of that already. But right now, if we're going on, the early reporting from John Heyman and others that basically are saying, 11 teams have checked in. The 7 that have been named are Yankees, Mets, Dodgers, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Giants. Giants are in, and we know are going to be trying on all these things. The Rays are the goofy one that, of course, came this last week. And then, in theory, 4 other ones, which I am going to safely assume the Nationals are one of them because there's no reason they wouldn't at least be giving Boris a call, as they often do. And then, there's some other big market teams we can maybe discuss. But the 7 teams that have been named, again, Yankees, Mets, Dodgers, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Giants, and then Rays.
Dodgers, we did. Blue Jays, they missed out on Ohtani in pretty embarrassing fashion. They want to at least get the I tried ribbon here. It's hard for me to see them committing to Soto at the number it's going to get to, considering where they're at in their competitive window with some of their better core players starting to reach free agency.
Yeah, this one.
And they're owned by a corporation who's not going to do something stupid out of joy. Like Soto doesn't bring the same level of eyeballs and advertising dollars that Ohtani would have, which was part of that calculation.
Yeah, that's true. However, if you're even considering this, just give Vlad whatever he wants. That's how I feel about that. It won't cost as much. Yeah. It'll cost a lot, and it should, but just keep the guy that's already there and happy. That's what I would do if I was the Blue Jays.
Red Sox, sure. I mean, it would be funny.
I think the Red Sox are going to... I don't expect them to sign Juan Soto, but I think I am a believer that they are going to start trying to actually do stuff this year. I think they've been shamed enough and do have enough money to at least put a much more... I think they're going to be closer to the Giants they might fall short on their biggest goals, but they're still going to end up spending money. That is my opinion on Boston. And San Francisco, Giants, I think, will be the same thing again.
Yeah, the Giants, who are now led by Buster Posey, former legendary catcher over there, he's going to do whatever he can to get them to be competitive next season. Like, that is 100% on the docket for him.
Yeah.
And considering they have missed out on big fishes the last 2 years, they were a finalist for Judge and they really wanted Ohtani. I could see them getting up there for Soto, but they're not going to win.
Here's what I'm going to say about the Rays, and then we're going to move on. The obvious point that was made very flippantly and kind of ridiculously by John Heyman about this is, they don't even have a stadium right now. Yeah, forget chasing free agents and the likelihood. And yes, okay, they offer Freddie Freeman a bunch of money, whatever. Like, there is no way that all of the majority of the energy this offseason is not being spent on figuring out like what is going to happen there with their stadium.
The reason that matters, but the reason that matters here specifically is because, yes, okay, so the baseball operations department, in theory, is the one like signing the players, and other people are in charge of figuring out where you're going to play. But when we're talking about someone like Soto, where that is a high level ownership conversation, leadership conversation, it is energy out of those two buckets. There's absolutely no way that the Rays end up signing him. It is comical that they were included on this list. I understand it is completionist in that, yes, the Rays picked up the phone and called Scott Boras and said, how about Juan Soto? And Scott Boras probably said, how about Juan Soto? We'll let you know.
Right. But hey, maybe he is a big fan of the skateboarding Ray and he will be a Ray someday. Probably not. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I do think the Nats are going to be a team that is going to reemerge here, but we will see. Long way to go.
You have a prediction?
Nets.
I have Yankees. I've decided.
Okay.
I go back and forth. So, I might say Yankees, or I might say Mets next week. I'm Yankees right now because of David Stearns, who is the president of baseball operations for the Mets. And I could see him getting to a point where he tells Steve Cohen, like, hey, if this amount of money that you've committed to Soto, give me 80% of that, and I will go get better players that in the aggregate can be better, which is a silly way of looking at it and a convincing way of looking at it. And David Stearns clearly knows how to do that well.
Again, this is why it's such a bizarre dynamic. Why is David Stearns going to the owner and saying, give me less money? Explain that.
Good point.
Okay.